The rain came down like a funeral shroud, turning the cemetery into a lake of mud and memory. I stood beside Chloe's grave, my sister's name carved into marble that was already slick with water, and felt nothing. Numbness had become my armor over the past 3 days, the only thing keeping me upright when everything inside wanted to collapse. I should have been listening to the priest's words, or comforting my mother who stood trembling under her black umbrella, but my eyes kept drifting to my father. Rob Carter, the financial titan, the man who built empires before breakfast, was walking away from the funeral. Not toward the parking lot where the procession would eventually gather, but toward the river that snaked behind the old cemetery grounds. Something in my gut twisted. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way he moved with such cold purpose, his face blank as a ledger sheet. In his hands was a wooden box wrapped in white cloth, small enough to cradle like a child. My breath caught. No one else seemed to notice him leaving. They were all trapped in their own grief, their own performative sorrow. I saw my mother then, Sarah Carter, half hidden behind an oak tree. Her eyes, red and swollen, tracked my father's movement with an expression I had never seen before. It was terror mixed with resignation, the look of someone watching a train wreck they knew was coming but could do nothing to stop. Rob reached the riverbank. The water was high from the rain, rushing and dark. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around. He simply swung his arm back and hurled the box into the current with the same efficiency he used to sign contracts that destroyed companies. The box hit the water and immediately began to float, carried quickly downstream by the swollen river. And then I heard it. A sound that should have been impossible, that cut through the rain and wind like a knife through my chest. A cry. Weak, desperate, unmistakably a baby's cry. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I ran, my heels sinking into the mud with each step, my dress catching on branches as I crashed through the brush along the riverbank. Behind me, I heard my mother scream my name, but I couldn't stop. The box was moving fast, tumbling in the current, and that cry, God, that cry kept piercing through everything. I don't remember kicking off my shoes. I don't remember the moment I hit the water. I only remember the shock of cold, the way the current tried to rip me downstream, and the desperate reach of my fingers as I lunged for the box now tangled in a clump of reeds 20 feet from shore. My hands closed around the wood. It was heavier than it should have been, weighted with something inside. The cry came again, muffled but persistent, and I pulled, dragged, fought against the river until my feet found purchase in the mud, and I could haul both myself and the box back to the bank. I collapsed on the grass, gasping, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the car key I pulled from my pocket. I used the edge of the key to pry at the lid, scratching and wedging until the seal broke and the top flew open. The world stopped. Inside, wrapped in a thin white cloth, was a newborn baby. His lips were tinged with blue, his skin too pale, but his chest was moving, rising and falling in rapid, desperate breaths. On his tiny wrist was a hospital bracelet, the kind they put on every baby born in a medical facility. I held it up with trembling fingers and read the faded print. Baby boy Morgan. Mother, Chloe Carter. Father, Jesse Morgan. My sister's baby, Chloe's son, the child my father just tried to murder. I pulled him from the box, barely aware of the water still streaming off my clothes, and pressed him against my chest. His cry became stronger, more insistent, and I started to sob. Huge, ugly sobs that made my whole body shake. Oh God, I whispered into his wet hair. Oh God, Chloe, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. When I looked up, my father was standing on the path above me. His face was still blank, emotionless, as if he had just witnessed something mildly inconvenient rather than his own daughter saving his grandson from drowning. My mother was behind him, her hands over her mouth, her whole body shaking. Give him to me, Eleanor, my father said. His voice was calm, measured, the same tone he used in boardrooms. You don't understand the situation. I held the baby tighter. He was warming against me, his cries settling into small whimpers. I understand that you just threw your grandson into a river, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. I understand that you tried to kill him. The paperwork was complicated, he said, taking a step closer. The timing was inappropriate. Your sister made a mistake. A life isn't a mistake. The words came out as a scream. The baby startled against me, and I forced myself to lower my voice. He's a person. He's Chloe's son, your grandson. We can fix this, my father said, and there was something in his eyes now, something that might have been fear if Rob Carter was capable of such an emotion. We can handle this quietly. The family's reputation doesn't need to be tarnished by your sister's choices. He's not a stain to be cleaned up, I whispered. My mother stepped forward then, her voice barely audible. Richard, please. That was his real name, though he insisted everyone call him Rob. It sounded odd, vulnerable, coming from my mother's lips. Please, just let her keep him. We can say he was adopted. We can say anything. My father's expression hardened. Diane, stay out of this. My mother's real name, equally strange to hear. In that moment, I realized I barely knew these people at all. They had worn their public faces so long that their real selves had fossilized underneath. I backed away, the baby clutched to my chest. "I'm taking him to the hospital." "Eleanor," my father said, and now there was steel in his voice. "You will regret this defiance. You will regret making an enemy of this family." I looked down at the baby, at his eyes slowly opening to reveal blue irises, the exact shade of Chloe's favorite paint color. "Then I guess I'm making enemies," I said, and I turned and ran. The past 6 months had been a living nightmare. Chloe, my older sister by 3 years, had always been the wild one, the artist, the dreamer in a family of bankers and lawyers. She painted landscapes that made you cry and wrote poetry that understood the secret language of broken hearts. Our father hated everything about her. When she brought Jesse home last Christmas, I knew there would be hell to pay. Jesse Morgan was a mechanic, a kind man with gentle hands and a laugh that could fill a room. He wore secondhand clothes and drove a truck that was older than both of us, and he looked at Chloe like she was the only light in the universe. My father took one look at him and saw failure, poverty, embarrassment, everything the Carter name supposedly stood against. The fight that followed was volcanic. I heard it from my room in the family mansion, the sound of my father's voice rising to a roar, Chloe's defiant shouts, my mother's useless attempts at peacemaking. "You will not bring that trash into this house," my father bellowed. "You will not disgrace this family with your childish rebellion." "I love him," Chloe screamed back. "I'm choosing happiness, Dad. I'm choosing to be human instead of a walking stock portfolio." "Then choose him and lose everything," my father said coldly. "I will cut you off. I will remove you from every trust, every account, every inheritance. You will be nothing." I found Chloe afterward in her old bedroom, packing her clothes into garbage bags because she didn't own any real luggage. "You're really leaving?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and smiled. "Ellie, I'm finally free, terrified, but free." She hugged me tight. "Take care of yourself. Don't let him eat your soul like he tried to eat mine." That was the last normal conversation we had. Chloe moved into Jesse's tiny apartment on the other side of town. She got a job at an art gallery and seemed, for a few months, genuinely happy. My father acted as if she had never existed. He removed her photos from the walls, struck her name from conversation, erased her from the family narrative with the same brutal efficiency he applied to failing investments. I tried to stay in touch. Secret coffee meetings, coded text messages, phone calls when I was sure my father wasn't monitoring my cell bill. Chloe was struggling financially. Jesse worked night shifts and double shifts to make rent, but they were making it work. They were building something real. And then, 4 months ago, Chloe called me at 2 a.m. "I need to see you," she said, her voice shaking. "Tomorrow. Please, Ellie. Just you." We met at a park near the river. She looked thin, pale, but there was something glowing about her too. She took my hand and placed it on her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. 12 weeks. "I haven't told Mom and Dad. I don't know if I should. Jesse and I, we're happy. But I'm scared. I'm so scared." I felt the slight swell under my palm and the fierce protectiveness that surged through me. "What do you want?" I asked. "To keep this baby safe," she said simply. "From everything. From him. I should have taken her somewhere far away. I should have helped her disappear completely. But I was still tangled in my own web of family obligation, still believing that somehow things would work out, that my father would soften when faced with a grandchild. I was so stupid. I don't know how my father found out about the pregnancy. Maybe he had someone watching Chloe. Maybe my mother let something slip. But 3 weeks later, Chloe showed up at my apartment in the middle of the night, wild-eyed and terrified. "He knows," she said. "Ellie, he knows about the baby. He came to the apartment. He said things. He offered money, so much money, to make it go away. He called Jesse a leech. He called our baby a mistake." "What did you say?" I asked, though I knew. "I told him to go to hell," Chloe said, and laughed, a broken sound. "I told him I'd rather die than let him touch my child. Then I ran. I've been staying with Jesse's aunt across town. We're figuring out what to do. I just needed you to know." That was 2 months ago, and then, a week before the funeral, I got the call that shattered everything. "Is this Eleanor Carter?" A professional voice, female, strained. "This is St. Augustine Hospital. I'm calling about your sister, Chloe Carter. I'm afraid there's been an emergency. She was brought in 2 hours ago with severe complications from childbirth. I'm very sorry, but she didn't survive. We did everything we could." I don't remember driving to the hospital. I don't remember the hallways or the paperwork or the doctor's sympathetic expression. I only remember seeing Chloe's body, still and small on the hospital bed, and feeling like my own heart had been ripped out. "Where's the baby?" I asked. "She had a baby. Where is he?" The nurse looked confused. I'm sorry, there's no record of an infant. Your sister came in alone. The pregnancy had already terminated. Terminated? I repeated numbly. What does that mean? The baby was already gone when she arrived, the nurse said carefully. I'm very sorry for your loss. But that didn't make sense. Chloe was 8 months pregnant. Even if something had gone wrong, there should have been a body, death certificates, something. I tried to find Jesse, called him a dozen times, but his phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment was empty when I went there. His neighbors hadn't seen him in days. My father arranged the funeral with cold efficiency. A tasteful affair, he called it. Closed casket, brief service. A carefully worded obituary that mentioned Chloe's artistic spirit, but nothing about her life, her love, her dreams. My mother cried silently through the whole thing, but never spoke. Never protested. Never asked the questions that were burning through my mind. Where was the baby? What happened to Chloe's son? Why wasn't Jesse there? And then I saw my father walking to the river with that white-wrapped box, and all the pieces fell into a horrifying pattern. I drove like a maniac to St. Augustine Hospital, the baby wrapped in my soaked jacket, pressed against my chest. He was crying again, stronger now, and I talked to him the whole way. It's okay, I whispered. You're safe now. I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you. The emergency room staff took him immediately, their faces professional but concerned. A nurse with kind eyes took my statement. I lied without hesitation. I found him near the river, I said. I heard crying and found him in a box. I think he's my nephew. My sister just died. She was pregnant. I need to know if he's okay. They ran tests, cleaned him up, put him in a warmer. A doctor came out an hour later. He's dehydrated and hypothermic, but stable, she said. You saved his life. Another 30 minutes and the outcome would have been very different. Can I see him? I asked. They brought me to a small room where he lay under warming lights, looking impossibly tiny and fragile. The hospital bracelet was still on his wrist. I took a photo of it with my phone, evidence I didn't know I'd need yet. I want to name him, I said. Can I do that, while we're figuring everything out? The nurse smiled. What would you like to call him? Lucas, I said. The name came from nowhere and everywhere. Lucas Vance. Vance was my mother's maiden name, a small rebellion, a way to connect him to family without tying him to the Carter legacy. I want to file for temporary guardianship. Is that possible? The nurse looked at me for a long moment. That's a complicated process, but we can start the paperwork. Are you sure? I looked at Lucas, at his tiny fingers curling and uncurling. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next 72 hours were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I moved Lucas into my apartment, a modern space downtown that suddenly felt both too large and too small. I learned how to change diapers at 3 a.m. I discovered that newborns eat every 2 hours and that I could function on 15-minute naps and pure adrenaline. My father called exactly once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice as cold as ever. This is pointless, Eleanor. Bring the child to me and we can resolve this situation appropriately. You're being emotional. It's unbecoming. I deleted the message and blocked his number. Then, 3 days after I brought Lucas home, my father appeared at my door. He didn't knock, just used the key he'd kept from when he co-signed my lease, walking in like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. Enough, he said, standing in my living room in his $1,000 suit. You've had your moment of heroism. Give me the baby and I'll arrange everything properly. I was holding Lucas, rocking him after a feeding. Properly? Like throwing him in a river? Like placing him in a home that can handle this situation, my father said smoothly. Like protecting what remains of this family's reputation. Like cleaning up your sister's mess. Chloe wasn't a mess, I said, and my voice was steel. She was a person. She loved. She created. She mattered. And this baby is not a problem to be solved. He's a reminder of everything your sister destroyed, my father said. A permanent link to that low-life mechanic. A stain on the Carter name. Get out, I said. My father smiled, cold and sharp. You can't keep him. You have no legal standing. I have lawyers, Eleanor. I have connections. I have the resources to take him from you and place him wherever I choose. I can make your life very difficult. Then make it difficult, I said, because I'm not giving him up. My father studied me for a long moment. You're just like your sister, he said finally. Stubborn, foolish, unable to see the bigger picture. He moved toward the door, then paused. Money, he said. You'll need it. Lawyers, CPS investigations, hospital bills. I have friends in all those places. You're declaring war on your own family. No, I said, looking at Lucas sleeping against my shoulder. I'm trying to create one. After he left, I sat in the dark for a long time, holding Lucas and shaking. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no plan, no backup, no support system. I was a 25-year-old woman who worked in marketing and whose idea of parenting came from television shows. But I had something my father didn't. I had love. And I had the truth. The next morning, I did something I should have done immediately. I called Jesse Morgan. "This time," he answered. "Jesse," I said. "It's Ellie, Chloe's sister. I need you to listen to me very carefully." There was a long pause. When he spoke, his voice was destroyed, raw with grief. I can't talk about her. They told me she was dead. They told me the baby was dead. I can't." "Jesse," I said urgently, "the baby isn't dead. Your son is alive. I have him. He's safe." Silence. Then, a sound that might have been a sob. "What?" "My father tried to kill him," I said, and told him everything. The funeral, the river, the hospital, all of it. "He's here with me. He's okay. His name is Lucas. I need you to come to St. Augustine Hospital tomorrow at noon. We're going to fix this." Jesse showed up early, his eyes red, rimmed, and wild. I was waiting in the hospital lobby with Lucas bundled in my arms. When Jesse saw him, he made a sound I'll never forget, something between a cry and a prayer. "Can I?" he asked, reaching out with shaking hands. I placed Lucas in his father's arms and watched Jesse crumble. He held his son and sobbed, great heaving sobs that echoed in the quiet hallway. "They told me you were gone," he whispered. "They told me I lost everything." "Who told you?" I asked. "Your father," Jesse said bitterly. "He came to the hospital while Chloe was in labor. He told me to leave, said I wasn't family, had security remove me. When I came back the next day, the nurses said Chloe had died and there was no baby. They said there had been complications, that it was better I didn't know the details. I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole pregnancy. My father's reach was longer and more poisonous than I'd imagined. I'm so sorry," I said. Jesse looked up at me, and I saw something hard forming behind the grief. "We're not letting him get away with this." "No," I agreed, "we're not." We spent the next week building a case. Jesse found a lawyer who worked pro bono for families in crisis. A fierce woman named Patricia, who listened to our story with a face like carved stone. "This is attempted murder," she said flatly. "Maybe not first degree, but at minimum child endangerment, abandonment, and conspiracy. You have the hospital records?" I had everything. The original bracelet proving Lucas was Chloe's baby. The doctor's statement about his hypothermia and dehydration. And, most importantly, I had something I hadn't told anyone yet. "I have video," I said quietly. Both Jesse and Patricia stared at me. "What?" "I have a dashcam in my car," I said. "It was parked at the cemetery. I went back and checked the footage. You can see my father walking to the river with the box. You can see him throw it. You can see me go after it." I pulled out my phone and showed them. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. Rob Carter, clear as day, disposing of what any reasonable person would identify as something precious into a swollen river. Patricia smiled for the first time. "This changes everything." We filed for emergency custody, naming Jesse as the biological father and me as the temporary guardian. We submitted all our evidence, including the dashcam footage, hospital records, and witness statements from the nurses who had treated Lucas. We requested a hearing, and we got one, scheduled for 2 weeks out. In those 2 weeks, my father tried everything. He sent flowers to my apartment with cards that read, "Congratulations on your charity work." My mother texted me at odd hours, messages that said, "I'm so sorry." But she never called, never showed up, never did anything that might actually help. Rob tried to bribe Jesse, offering him money to disappear. He tried to threaten me, having his lawyers send letters about my lease, my job, my finances, all the ways he could make my life collapse. He even tried to go to the media, planting a story about a family dispute that thankfully never gained traction. But through it all, Lucas grew stronger. He filled out, his color improved, his cries became healthier and more demanding. He started to focus his eyes, to grab at my fingers, to make those small baby sounds that might someday be words. Jesse came over every day, learning how to feed him, change him, rock him to sleep. We were figuring it out together, building something from the ruins of what my father had tried to destroy. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching Lucas breathe in his bassinet, and wondered if I was doing the right thing. My father had power, resources, connections. What did I have? A dashcam video and the truth? My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "I'm testifying tomorrow. I'm telling the truth. I can't live like this anymore." I stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone down. I didn't know if I believed her, but maybe, finally, something was shifting. The courthouse was old stone and wood paneling, the kind of building that had seen 1,000 family tragedies play out in its rooms. We arrived early, Jesse holding Lucas while I carried all our paperwork. My father was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than my car. My mother stood slightly apart, looking small and lost. The judge was a woman named Marion Decker, probably in her 60s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She read through our file with an expression that gave away nothing, then looked up at my father. "Mr. Carter," she said, "your lawyer claims you're prepared to take custody of your grandson and provide him with a stable home. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," my father said smoothly. "This has been a terrible tragedy, losing our daughter. But my wife and I are prepared to raise the child in an environment that can provide for all his needs." "I see," Judge Decker said. She turned to me. "Miss Carter, you're asking for joint guardianship with the biological father, Mr. Morgan. Why?" I stood up, my legs shaking. "Because my father tried to kill this baby, Your Honor. Because he threw him in a river and would have let him drown if I hadn't stopped him." The courtroom went silent. My father's lawyer started to object, but Judge Decker held up her hand. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence?" I nodded and handed over the USB drive with the dashcam footage. The judge watched it on a laptop, her expression growing harder with each second. When it finished, she looked at my father. "Mr. Carter, is that you in this video?" "Your Honor, this is being taken completely out of context," my father began. "Is that you disposing of something in the river on the day of your daughter's funeral?" The judge pressed. "I was disposing of some items that were too painful to keep," my father said. "Medical equipment, reminders of the pregnancy. It was poor judgment, but I was grieving." "Medical equipment?" Judge Decker repeated slowly. "Was there a living baby inside this medical equipment?" "Of course not," my father said, but there was sweat on his forehead now. Jesse stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to testify." For the next 20 minutes, Jesse told his story. The forced removal from the hospital, the lies about Chloe and the baby being dead, the way my father had tried to erase both Chloe and Lucas from existence. His voice broke multiple times, but he pushed through. Then my mother stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak." My father turned to stare at her, his face frozen in shock. "Diane, sit down." "No," my mother said, and her voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Not anymore." She looked at the judge. "My husband did throw our grandson into the river. I watched it happen. I was too afraid to stop him, and I'll have to live with that cowardice for the rest of my life. But I won't compound it by lying now. That baby deserves better. He deserves to be with people who will protect him, not people who will sacrifice him for appearances." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at my father. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be very clear. I don't care how much money you have or how many lawyers you can afford. I care about the welfare of this child. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting emergency physical and legal guardianship to Jesse Morgan and Eleanor Carter. You and your wife will be allowed supervised visitation only, contingent on completing family counseling. A social worker will visit all parties within 72 hours. This case will be reviewed in 6 months. If I find that you have attempted to interfere with this arrangement in any way, I will pursue criminal charges. Do you understand?" My father's face was white. He didn't answer, just stood up and walked out of the courtroom, his lawyers scrambling after him. The judge turned to Jesse and me. "You two have taken on something incredibly difficult. I hope you understand that. Raising a child, especially under these circumstances, is not going to be easy." "We know, Your Honor," I said, "but we're ready." "Then good luck," she said. "You're going to need it." Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wet pavement into a field of scattered diamonds. Jesse held Lucas up to the light, and our son, because that's what he felt like now, our son, blinked and made a small sound that might have been a laugh. I found myself back at the river 3 days later. I don't know why I went. Maybe I needed to see the place where everything changed, where the current could have carried Lucas away forever but didn't. My father was there. I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. He was standing on the bank, staring at the water, and he looked smaller than I remembered, older. "You always were the troublemaker," he said without turning around. "Even as a child, always questioning, always pushing boundaries. I should have known it would be you." "Someone had to," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I was raised by a man who believed reputation was everything. Who taught me that weakness was death, that emotion was a liability, that the only thing that mattered was the name you left behind." He paused. "I sacrificed everything on that altar. My relationship with your sister, my marriage, any chance at being a decent human being. You can still change," I said. "You can still be better." He finally turned to look at me. "Can I? When everything I was taught tells me that turning back is failure?" "You threw your grandson into a river," I said flatly. "There's nowhere to go but up from there." He almost smiled. It was a terrible expression, full of self-hatred and regret. "You humiliated me in that courtroom." "I saved a baby," I corrected. "If that humiliated you, that's your problem." We stood there in silence for a while. Finally, my father spoke again. "I'm setting up a scholarship fund, in Chloe's name, for young women who want to study art but whose families won't support them." I stared at him. "Why?" Because I can't bring her back, he said. Because I destroyed my daughter trying to protect a legacy that doesn't mean anything. Because maybe, if I help other girls like her, it will somehow matter. He looked at me. I want to set up another fund too. For boys like Jesse. Kids who don't have the right last name or the right connections. I want to call it the Second Chance Foundation. I want it in writing, I said. Legal documents. Irrevocable trusts. I don't want you to be able to take it back when you change your mind. Done, he said. And I want to be on the board, I added. I want oversight. You don't get to control this. Agreed, he said. He held out his hand. Partners? I didn't take it. Probationary collaborators, I said. You have a lot to prove. He lowered his hand. Fair enough. I walked away and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the river running, but it sounded different now. Not like it was carrying secrets away, but like it was singing them back to the world. Jesse and I moved in together 2 months later, a small house on the edge of town with a yard and a nursery that we painted in shades of blue and green. My mother came to visit once a week, learning how to be a grandmother, slowly rebuilding bridges she'd let burn. She brought Chloe's paintings, the ones she'd hidden in the attic, and we hung them throughout the house. Lucas grew. He learned to hold his head up, to smile, to reach for things. His eyes stayed that perfect shade of blue. Jesse went back to work, but now he had help from his aunt and from me. I cut my hours at work, learning to balance career and family in a way that felt honest rather than suffocating. My father kept his word about the scholarship funds. The Chloe Carter Memorial Scholarship launched 6 months after the hearing, and the applications flooded in. Girls who wanted to paint, to write, to create, but whose families called it foolish. We gave out 10 full-ride scholarships that first year. The Second Chance Foundation followed, aimed at young men from difficult circumstances who needed support to build stable lives. Jesse helped interview candidates, seeing himself in their struggles. A year after that terrible day at the cemetery, we held the first annual scholarship ceremony. It was held at a community center downtown, and the room was packed with recipients, their families, donors, and media. My father was there, sitting in the back row. My mother sat beside him, but her eyes were on the stage where Jesse and I stood with Lucas. I gave the speech. I talked about Chloe, about her art and her courage. I talked about second chances and the importance of supporting people's dreams rather than crushing them for the sake of appearances. I talked about a cry from a river that changed everything. This scholarship isn't just about money for education, I said. It's a reminder that no life is disposable, no love is a mistake, and justice will always find its way, even through the deepest waters. The applause was thunderous. Lucas, now a year old and sitting on Jesse's hip, clapped his hands together in imitation, making everyone laugh. After the ceremony, reporters wanted to interview us. They wanted the story of the scholarships, the tragedy behind them. My father tried to slip out the back, but a reporter caught him. Mr. Carter, these scholarships are in your daughter's name. How does it feel to honor her legacy this way? My father looked at the reporter, then at me across the room. It feels like trying to repay an unpayable debt, he said. It feels like the bare minimum a failed father can do. The reporter looked uncomfortable. Can you elaborate? No, my father said. If you want the real story, talk to my daughter Eleanor. She's the hero here, not me. He left, and I watched him go. My mother stayed, coming over to hold Lucas, to talk quietly with Jesse about his latest project at work. She was trying, in her own limited way. It would never be enough to make up for her complicity, but it was something. That night, after everyone left and Lucas was asleep, Jesse and I stood in the nursery, watching our son breathe. Do you think she knows? Jesse asked quietly. Chloe, do you think she knows he's safe? I think she knows, I said. I think she's been watching the whole time. Jesse put his arm around me. Thank you, he said. For everything. For saving him. For fighting. For giving me my son back. Thank you for being the kind of man worth fighting for, I said. We stood there in the darkness, listening to Lucas sleep, and I thought about how far we'd come from that rainy day at the cemetery, how close we'd come to losing everything, how one moment of courage could change the entire trajectory of a life. The river still flowed through town, but I didn't avoid it anymore. Sometimes I'd take Lucas there, let him watch the water rush by, tell him stories about his mother that I was determined he'd never forget, about her paintings that captured light like no one else could. About her laugh that sounded like music, about her bravery in choosing love over comfort, even when it cost her everything. Your mom was the bravest person I ever knew. I'd tell him, and he'd look up at me with those blue eyes and I'd see her there, alive in him, continuing. 6 months after the scholarship ceremony, my father made another unexpected move. He called me, his voice formal and stiff. I'd like to see Lucas. Supervised, as the court ordered. If you're willing. I thought about saying no. God knows I'd earned the right to refuse him anything. But I looked at Lucas, playing with blocks on the floor, and thought about how Chloe would have wanted him to know his grandfather, even a broken, damaged version. Therapy first, I said. Not family counseling, real therapy. Individual sessions with someone who specializes in narcissistic personality patterns and family trauma. I want proof you're going. I want progress reports from your therapist, with your consent. And if you miss even one session, the visits stop. There was a long pause. That's a lot to ask. You threw him in a river, I said calmly. This is nothing. Fine, he said finally. He actually followed through. Every week, my father went to therapy. I got the reports, carefully worded summaries that showed slow, painful progress. He was confronting things he'd buried for decades. The abuse from his own father, the way he'd learned to equate emotion with weakness and control with love. The mechanisms he'd built to survive that had become the tools he used to destroy. It wasn't transformation. It wasn't redemption. But it was something. The first supervised visit happened at a neutral location, a family center with toys and monitors. My mother came too, nervous and eager. Lucas was 18 months old by then, walking and babbling and full of personality. He looked at these strangers with Chloe's eyes and Jesse's curiosity. My father sat on the floor, this man who commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors, and tried to stack blocks with his grandson. His hands shook. Lucas knocked the blocks down and laughed, and I saw something crack in my father's face. He looks like her, he said quietly. He is her, I said, and Jesse, and himself. He's not going to be who you want him to be. He's going to be who he is. My father nodded slowly. Good, he said, and I think he meant it. The visits continued, slowly building toward something that might eventually resemble a relationship. My mother was better at it, more natural, like she was remembering how to be human after years of playing a role. She brought books and sang songs and cried when Lucas called her Nana for the first time. My father remained awkward, uncertain, but present. That was the best I could hope for. Meanwhile, Jesse and I were building our life together. Not a romantic relationship, though people often assumed we were a couple. We were something different, something I didn't have words for. Co-parents, family, partners in the project of raising Lucas and healing from everything Chloe's death had torn open. Jesse started dating again after a year, a kind woman named Maria who worked at the library. She understood the situation, understood that Lucas would always be his first priority, understood that Chloe's ghost lived in the house not as a haunting but as a blessing. I liked her. Lucas liked her. That was what mattered. I dated too, casually, nothing serious. I was focused on Lucas, on my career, on the scholarship foundation that had become my passion project. I interviewed applicants, read their essays about dreams deferred and families who didn't understand. I saw Chloe in every one of them. The foundation grew. After 3 years, we'd given out over 100 scholarships. Recipients started to graduate, to have shows, to publish books, to teach. They sent us updates, photos, thank you notes that made me cry. We'd created something that would outlive all of us. My father's contribution was financial. He wrote the checks but stayed out of the decision-making, honoring the boundaries I'd set. He never tried to use the foundation for publicity or to rehabilitate his image. That was my one condition, and he respected it. The foundation existed for the recipients, not for him. 4 years after the river, Lucas started preschool. He was bright, energetic, full of questions about everything. He loved to paint. Long, messy sessions with more paint on him than on the paper. Jesse and I would hang every piece on the refrigerator, a gallery of childhood joy. One day, Lucas came home with a family tree project. I need to fill in all the people, he said, his face serious. Miss Rodriguez says everyone has lots of different kinds of family. Jesse and I looked at each other. We'd been preparing for this conversation, but it still felt too soon. You're right, I said. You have a big family. Your dad, Jesse. Your Aunt Ellie, that's me. Your Nana Sarah. Your grandfather, Rob. And your mom in heaven, Chloe. She's an angel, Lucas said confidently, and I didn't correct him. She is, Jesse agreed, his voice thick. And she loved you so much. Even before you were born, she loved you more than anything. Why did she go to heaven? Lucas asked. This was the hard part. Her body got sick, I said carefully. Sometimes that happens, and doctors can't fix it. But she made sure you were safe before she left. She made sure you had people who would love you and take care of you. Like you, Lucas said, hugging me. Like me, I agreed. And your dad, and Nana, and even Grandpa Rob, who's learning how to be better. We filled out the family tree together, a complicated web of connections that didn't fit the neat boxes the worksheet provided. We added Chloe at the top, a star Jesse drew next to her name. We added Maria, Jesse's girlfriend, in her own special space. We added my father's sister, Lucas's great aunt who lived in California and sent birthday cards. We added Jesse's cousins and my college roommate who had become Lucas's honorary aunt. Family wasn't what you were born into, we were learning. It was what you built, what you chose, what you fought for. Lucas brought the tree to school, proud of his complicated family. His teacher called me later. I just wanted you to know, she said. Lucas told the whole class that his mom is a superhero angel and his Aunt Ellie saved him from a river. He's very proud of his story. Thank you for letting him share it, I said. He's a special kid, she said. You're doing something right. The 5th anniversary of Chloe's death fell on a Tuesday. Jesse took the day off work. I called in sick. We took Lucas to the cemetery, to the grave where all of this had started. The headstone was beautiful, white marble with Chloe's name and dates and a quote from one of her poems. She painted the world in colors only love could see. My father had paid for it, one of his early attempts at making amends. We brought flowers, wildflowers that Chloe would have loved, messy and vibrant and alive. Lucas helped us arrange them in the vase built into the stone. Hi, Mommy, he said, patting the marble. I'm 5 now. I can write my name. Want to see? He used his finger to trace letters in the air, his tongue poking out in concentration. Jesse knelt beside him, one hand on his son's shoulder, tears streaming down his face. I stood back, giving them space, and noticed someone else approaching. My father, alone, carrying a single white rose. He stopped when he saw us, uncertain. I can come back, he said. No, Jesse said, surprising all of us. Stay. She was your daughter too. My father approached slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. He placed his rose next to our wildflowers, the formal and the chaotic side by side. I'm sorry, he said to the headstone. I'm so sorry, Chloe. For everything. For not seeing you. For not protecting you. For not being the father you deserved. Lucas looked up at him. It's okay, Grandpa Rob. Mommy forgives you. Aunt Ellie told me angels forgive everybody. My father's face crumpled. He sat down hard on the grass, this powerful man reduced to tears, and Lucas went to him, patted his shoulder the way he'd been comforted 1,000 times. Don't cry. It makes me sad when you cry. My father pulled Lucas into a hug, careful and awkward, and whispered something I couldn't hear. But I saw his lips move. Saw the words taking shape. I love you. I'll do better. I promise. We stayed at the cemetery for an hour, telling stories about Chloe, letting Lucas ask questions, existing together in grief and healing. When we left, my father walked with us to the parking lot. Thank you, he said to me, for letting me be here, for giving me chances I don't deserve. It's not for you, I said honestly. It's for Lucas. He deserves to know all his family, even the complicated parts. I know, he said, but thank you anyway. Life continued. Lucas grew, learned to ride a bike, lost his first tooth, discovered he loved science as much as art. Jesse and Maria got married in a small ceremony where Lucas was the ring bearer, serious and proud in his little suit. My father and mother came, sat in the back, applauded politely. They were becoming part of the fabric of Lucas's life, threads that had been torn but were slowly being rewoven. The Scholarship Foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary with a gala at a downtown hotel. Hundreds of people came, recipients and donors and supporters. We set up a gallery of Chloe's paintings, borrowed from museums and private collections and our own walls. People moved through it in silence, awed by her talent, by the life that had been cut too short. I stood in front of my favorite piece, a landscape of a river at sunrise, all gold and blue and infinite possibility. She never got to see this, I said to Jesse, who'd come to stand beside me. Never got to see what her work would become, what Lucas would become. She knew, Jesse said quietly. Somehow, she knew. The speeches that night focused on the future. Current recipients talked about their dreams. Alumni talked about how the scholarship had changed their trajectories. My father, in a rare public appearance, talked about the importance of supporting young people in pursuing their passions, rather than crushing them to fit a mold. I failed my own daughter in this regard, he said, his voice measured but emotional. I let fear and pride destroy something precious. This foundation exists to make sure other families don't make the same mistake, to honor my daughter's memory by supporting others like her. It's not enough, but it's something. When it was my turn to speak, I brought Lucas up on stage with me. He was 10 now, all long limbs and missing teeth and Chloe's creative spirit. This young man, I said, started his life in the worst way possible. He lost his mother before he could know her. He was thrown away by someone who should have protected him. But he survived. He thrived. Because love is stronger than cruelty, and hope is more powerful than fear. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces of young artists who reminded me so much of Chloe. Every scholarship we give out is an act of resistance against a world that says, some lives matter less than appearances. Every student we support is proof that second chances are real, that families can be rebuilt, that justice might be delayed but it always arrives. The applause was overwhelming. Lucas squeezed my hand, overwhelmed by the noise and attention. I looked over to where Jesse sat with Maria, both of them crying. Behind them, my parents, my father's face unreadable but his hands clapping steadily. After the event, as we were packing up Chloe's paintings, my father approached me one last time. "Can I show you something?" he asked. He led me to his car, parked in the garage beneath the hotel. From his trunk, he pulled out a painting I'd never seen before, wrapped in protective cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a portrait of a river, painted in Chloe's distinctive style but more mature, more confident than her early work. "She gave this to me," he said quietly. "Right before she left home for good. I never hung it up. I couldn't bear to look at it because it reminded me of everything I'd lost. Everything I'd thrown away." He traced the frame with one finger. "I want you to have it, for Lucas, so he can see what his mother became, who she was turning into before we lost her." I took the painting, the canvas heavy in my hands. The river it depicted wasn't threatening or turbulent. It was peaceful, flowing through a landscape painted in hope. "Thank you," I said. "No," my father said. "Thank you for not giving up, for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away, for saving him. For saving all of us, really, even if I didn't deserve it." We stood there in the parking garage, two people connected by blood and tragedy and the slow, painful work of healing. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was something like peace. That night, I hung the painting in Lucas's room, above his bed where he could see it every morning. He stared at it for a long time. "Did my mom paint that?" he asked. "She did," I said. "It's a river, like the one near the cemetery. But see how she painted it? It's not scary. It's beautiful." "Like her," Lucas said simply. "Like her," I agreed. 12 years after that rainy day at the cemetery, Lucas graduated from middle school. He was 13, awkward and brilliant and kind, with Chloe's artistic talent and Jesse's mechanical mind. He wanted to be an engineer, to build things that would help people. He also painted in his free time, long abstract pieces that reminded me so much of his mother it hurt. At his graduation, our complicated family filled 2 rows. Jesse and Maria and their baby daughter, Lucas's half-sister Emily. My parents, older now. My father walking with a cane after a stroke 2 years prior. Jesse's aunt and cousins. My college friends who'd become Lucas's honorary aunts and uncles. All of us together, bound by the child who'd survived when he shouldn't have. Lucas gave a speech as valedictorian. He talked about perseverance and second chances and the importance of fighting for justice even when it seems impossible. He talked about his mother, the artist who taught him that beauty matters, that creativity is courage. He talked about his family, the complicated web of people who'd fought for him. "I'm here because my Aunt Ellie wouldn't give up," he said, looking right at me. "Because my dad fought for me, because even people who made terrible mistakes learn to do better. I'm proof that it's never too late to choose love over fear, that families can be rebuilt, that every life has value worth fighting for." The entire auditorium stood and applauded. I couldn't see through my tears, but I felt Jesse grab my hand on one side and my mother's grip on the other, and I felt, maybe for the first time since that terrible day at the river, something like complete peace. Later, at the celebration dinner, my father pulled Lucas aside. I watched from across the room as they talked, my father's hand on Lucas's shoulder, Lucas nodding seriously. When they finished, Lucas came over to me. "Grandpa Rob told me everything," he said quietly. "About the river, about what he did, about how you saved me." My heart stopped. "Lucas, I know," he said. "Dad told me years ago, but I didn't really understand. But now I do." He hugged me tight. "Thank you. For my whole life, thank you." I held him and cried into his hair, this boy who'd become a young man, who carried Chloe's legacy and Jesse's strength and somehow, miraculously, had survived everything that had tried to destroy him. "You don't have to thank me," I whispered. "You're family. That's what family does." "Not all family," he said, pulling back to look at me with those blue eyes. "Not everyone would have jumped in that river. Not everyone would have fought like you did." He was right, of course. But I didn't know how to explain that it had never felt like a choice. That the moment I'd heard his cry from that river, my path had been set. That saving him had saved me too, had given me purpose and meaning, and showed me what love could do when it refused to accept defeat. The Scholarship Foundation continued to grow. By Lucas's 16th birthday, we'd helped over 500 students pursue their dreams. The Second Chance Foundation had assisted hundreds of young men in building stable lives. Between them, they'd created a legacy that Chloe would have been proud of. My father's health declined slowly. The stroke had changed him, softened him in ways therapy never quite managed. He spent his afternoons painting with Lucas, 2 artists separated by generations and trauma but connected by blood and the slow work of reconciliation. His paintings were terrible, clumsy amateur attempts, but Lucas praised every one and hung them in his room. On what would have been Chloe's 40th birthday, we gathered at the river, the whole family. Lucas was 17 now, preparing for college, deciding between art school and engineering programs. He'd gotten full rides to both, his talent and grades earning him opportunities his mother never had. We released paper lanterns into the sky, each one carrying a message for Chloe. Lucas's said, "Thank you for fighting for me, even when it cost you everything." "I'll make you proud," Jessie said. "I still love you." "I'll always love you," my mother said. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to save you, but I'm grateful for the chance to know your son." My father's hands shook too much to write, so Lucas wrote for him. "I was wrong about everything that mattered. I'm trying to do better. Forgive me." He read it aloud, tears streaming down his weathered face, and released the lantern with Lucas's help. Mine said simply, "You live in him, in every painting and laugh and act of kindness. You won. Love won." We watched the lanterns drift up into the twilight, carrying our words to wherever Chloe was. The river beside us flowed steady and calm, no longer a place of trauma but a reminder of everything that had been overcome. "She'd love this," Jessie said quietly. "All of us together. The foundation. Lucas. All of it." "She does love it," Lucas said with certainty. "I feel her sometimes when I'm painting. Like she's standing behind me, guiding my hand. Like she's proud." "She is," I said. "Wherever she is, whatever happens after we die, she knows. She sees you. And she's so proud." We stood by the river until the stars came out, until the lanterns were tiny lights in the distance, until Lucas said he was hungry and could we please get pizza. Normal life reasserted itself, as it always does, and we left the river behind. But I returned often over the years, alone or with Lucas, and I always felt Chloe there. In the sound of water over stones, in the way light danced on the current, in the knowledge that sometimes, when you're brave enough to jump into the darkness, you don't drown, you save a life, you change everything. You prove that justice and love and hope are not just abstract concepts but forces as powerful as any river, capable of carving new paths through the hardest stone. Lucas graduated high school with honors. He chose engineering, but minored in art, refusing to give up either passion. At his graduation party, surrounded by family and friends and scholarship recipients he'd mentored, he gave a toast. "I'm here because someone loved me enough to jump into a river," he said, raising his glass. "Because people fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Because families aren't just born. They're chosen and built and fought for every single day. So here's to second chances. Here's to justice that never stops flowing, even through the deepest waters. Here's to my mom, who I never got to know but who gave me life twice. Once when she bore me, and once when she made sure I'd be loved even after she was gone. And here's to my Aunt Ellie, who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to do what's right anyway." Everyone drank, and I found myself surrounded by hugs and tears and gratitude. My father, frailer now but still present, took my hand. "You were always the brave one," he said. "I was too blind to see it. But you saved more than Lucas that day. You saved what was left of our family. Thank you." It wasn't redemption. It wasn't erasure of the harm he'd done. But it was acknowledgement, accountability, and the closest thing to healing our broken family would ever achieve. As the party wound down and guests departed, I found myself alone with Lucas on the back deck, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. "Are you scared?" I asked. "About college, leaving home, all of it?" "Terrified," he admitted, "but also excited. I'm going to do great things, Aunt Ellie. Things that would make Mom proud. Things that prove her life mattered. That mine matters too." "You already have," I said. "Just by being you. Just by surviving and thriving and being kind despite everything. That's the greatest achievement of all." He leaned his head on my shoulder. This young man who'd started life in a box in a river and become someone extraordinary. "I love you," he said. "You know that, right? You're not just my aunt. You're my second mom. You're the person who showed me what unconditional love looks like." "I love you too," I said, "more than you'll ever know." We sat there in comfortable silence, and I thought about that rainy day 13 years ago. How I'd heard a cry that shouldn't have existed. How I'd jumped into cold water without thinking. How one moment of courage had cascaded into years of love and struggle and growth. The river still flowed through town, just beyond the cemetery where Chloe rested. But it wasn't a symbol of loss anymore. It was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, even when powerful people try to erase the powerless, even when justice seems impossible, sometimes someone jumps in, sometimes someone fights back. Sometimes love wins, not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed, but because someone decides it's worth fighting for. Lucas went to college and thrived. He called every week, sent photos of his projects and paintings. He came home for holidays and brought friends who became part of our ever-expanding family. He fell in love with a kind person who understood his complicated history and loved him for it. He graduated, got a good job, started his own life. The Scholarship Foundation continued, now with Lucas on the board, bringing a new generation's perspective to supporting young artists. My father passed away quietly in his sleep at 82, having spent his final years trying to make amends for a lifetime of cruelty. At his funeral, Lucas gave the eulogy, speaking honestly about both the harm his grandfather had caused and the attempts at redemption that had shaped Lucas's teenage years. He wasn't a good man, Lucas said, but he tried to become a better one, and that trying mattered. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it created something new. It gave us scholarships and second chances and proof that change, however late and incomplete, is still possible. My mother lived another 5 years after that, spending her final days surrounded by great-grandchildren and art projects and the family she'd failed to protect but finally learned to love. She told me, near the end, "Thank you for being strong enough to do what I couldn't. Thank you for saving him, for saving all of us." "I didn't save everyone," I said gently. "I couldn't save Chloe." "You saved her son," my mother said. "You saved her legacy. You saved her dream of a world where love matters more than appearances. That's everything." Years passed. Lucas married, had children of his own, daughters with Chloe's eyes and Jesse's laugh. He named his first daughter Chloe, and watching him hold her for the first time, I saw the circle complete itself. Loss and life, tragedy and triumph, all woven together into something that transcended the pain. On the 20th anniversary of that day at the river, Lucas and I returned to the spot where everything had changed. He was 33 now, a successful engineer and weekend artist, father of 3, the kind of man who made the world better just by being in it. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't heard me?" he asked, standing where I'd pulled him from the water 2 decades before. "Every day," I admitted. "And every day I'm grateful that I did, that I was there, that I had the courage to jump." "It wasn't just courage," Lucas said. "It was love. You loved me before you even knew me. Loved me because I was Chloe's son. That's the most powerful thing anyone's ever done for me." We stood there together, watching the river flow, and I thought about all the lives that had been changed by one moment of choice, the scholarship recipients who'd gone on to create beautiful things. The young men who'd been given second chances and seized them. My father, who'd learned too late but learned nonetheless. My mother, who'd found her voice after decades of silence. And most of all, Lucas himself. Proof that throwing someone away doesn't make them worthless. Proof that love is stronger than cruelty. Proof that sometimes, against all odds, justice prevails. The river kept flowing, as rivers do. But now when I heard its voice, it wasn't whispering secrets or carrying away shame. It was singing. A song of survival and courage and the unstoppable force of love that refuses to accept defeat. Lucas pulled out his phone and took a photo of the river, the light catching the water just right. "For the Foundation's newsletter," he explained. "Reminder of where it all started." "And where it's going," I added. He smiled, Chloe's smile on a face that was uniquely his own. "Exactly." We walked back to our cars together, leaving the river behind but carrying its lessons forward. Every life has value. Every voice deserves to be heard. Every act of courage ripples outward in ways we can't predict but can always hope for. I jumped into a river 20 years ago to save a baby I'd never met. What I discovered was that in saving him, I'd saved myself too. Found purpose, strength, meaning. Learned that family isn't just what you're born into, but what you fight for, build, and choose every single day. The river kept flowing. Justice kept coming. Love kept winning. And somewhere, I like to think, Chloe was smiling.